Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar on how to break into the in-demand field of federal acquisition. My name is Mindy Priyan, and I am the Director of Talent Acquisition for 7 Sense Consulting, and I would like to personally welcome you to our discussion today. The webinar is being sponsored by 7 Sense Consulting. 7 Sense is the leading company that provides acquisition consulting services to agencies across the federal government. We have panelists today who are excited to share what they know about the federal acquisition career field and to provide you with concrete tips on how you can start and advance your career in this field. We're recording this event, and all registered participants will receive a link to the recording. So the overall purpose of the webinar today is to share information with you that can help you reach your career goals, as well as to establish a relationship with you for the future. Since 7 Sense is always looking to hire great people at all stages of their acquisition career, we know that the best way to start and advance your career in the federal acquisition field is to join a company that specializes in federal acquisition, which is exactly what 7 Sense Consulting does. Okay, so before we get started, I'd like to launch a quick survey to see who we have in the audience today. So if you would tell us about yourself. Are you a student getting ready to start your career? Are you a career changer or a job seeker looking to enter the career? Are you a practitioner looking for advice on how to supercharge your career? Responses are coming in. Wow, we've got a good variety of folks. Collecting responses here for another couple of seconds. And I'm going to close the poll. And I'm going to share the results of the poll. So it looks like we have a good number of students in our audience today, a good number of job seekers and career changers. That seems to be the majority, and about 20% of you currently practitioners in the federal acquisition field. We're delighted to have such a great variety in our audience today. So thank you for participating in our survey. And I am going to go back to our presentation here. And thank you for telling us about yourself. And now, just a few housekeeping items before I hand things over to our discussion moderator. All attendees are on mute for today's session. So if you have any questions for me or for our panelists, please use the questions field on your browser or the question mark icon in your mobile device. And we will try to address any questions that you have specifically during the question and answer portion of today's webinar. So without further ado, I would like to introduce today's moderator, Gloria Friesen. Give her a moment to join us here.
Hi, Mindy.
Hi, Gloria. Gloria is a director with 7 Sense Consulting, and she's going to be introducing today's panelists and jump into today's content. Gloria, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Mindy. We're so excited to have you here to share with you what we know about the acquisition career field and, more importantly, 7 Sense Consulting. Okay. Okay, so we have a panel here for you today. There is a breadth of experience on this panel. We have Jackie Hood. She is a junior acquisition specialist, and you may hear these job terms and titles, and we'll explain more about them as we go along. But Jackie is new to the career field, so we thought it really important that you get the aspects from someone fresh into this career field and get her perspectives on it. We have Lorna Finn. Lorna is mid-career to senior level in acquisition, Lorna has a lot of experience. She's worked in the field over 10 years. And we have Glenn Harris. Glenn is also mid to senior in the acquisition career field, and Glenn has a breadth of experience as well. And then we have Kevin Nash, who is our more senior member on the panel, and Kevin has a lot of experience with acquisition, and he's really looking forward to sharing all of his stories with you. And I am a service delivery executive with 7 Sense Consulting, and I have some things to share with you, but really you'll hear from our panelists. Their stories are amazing, and we look forward to sharing with you. Okay, so as these items come on screen, we'll ask the question, what do all these things have in common? And you may not be aware of it. I mean, there are some of you who are not new to the acquisition field, but there are a great many of you that seem to be job seekers, students, newcomers, people who are looking for job changes. But all of these items were actually funded with government funds. And I'll just highlight a couple of them here for you. GPS actually originated out of NASA. You know, it actually started there, and then the Navy evolved it, and that's what we use every day. We can't even go down the street hardly without using GPS. Another product, M&Ms. It's very not well known, but in the Spanish Civil War, there were rations for soldiers that were needed, and they thought chocolate would be a good treat, but of course in the summertime, chocolate melts. So they coated it in a nice crunchy shell, which now we enjoy today as, you know, it's very widely shared by everyone. So those are just a few things, but all of these things came out of the government funding. So just wanted to share that with you. Okay. Okay, so how much does the government spend each year? So looking at this chart, you can tell there's billions of dollars that the government spends, and this money is spent on a variety of products and services, from commercial items like computers to what we call research and development items. So these are things that are not well known or mainstream. These could be new technologies that in some cases end up in our households, but they are funded through the government. And each year, that money is just increasing on what we're investing, what the government is investing, and you as a taxpayer is investing in the products and services that the government purchases. Okay, and what does the government spend money on? So as I mentioned, it could be a number of things. Any item you can think of, the government is probably spending money on that item. It could be for the military, for service members, or it could be on health-related products and services. But this gives you an idea of where the money is spent across the government. And these are just the top categories of what we call industry codes. So everything that's purchased by the government is actually tracked and logged, so they know where the money is being spent, how much is being spent. And as you can see, of course, aircraft, of course, those being very big projects, that's where a good deal of the money goes. Okay, so now you're looking at not only is the government spending money, but how does it get spent? So there is something called the acquisition workforce. All the members of the panel, including myself, we are considered part of that workforce. So 7 Sense Consulting, our primary goal is to support the government in their purchases and their buys of commodities or products and services. And we support all of these agencies that you see here in some form or fashion. Maybe not every single one, but certainly we have had experience with these agencies and departments as customers. So there are about I think 68 of 69 agencies in the government which contract for products and services. And I think that's a really great thing for those of you out there who are looking for a job change, because there is no shortage of jobs to be had within the acquisition career field. Okay. Okay, so all of this to say that this is a high demand job field. The federal government will always have to spend funds for goods and services, and in order to do that, they require people to facilitate that process. So we have another poll question up. Okay. Well, I think we can actually move on. I think the only other thing that I would highlight on here is that for those of you who may be outside of the Washington, D.C. area, the acquisition workforce actually expands across the country. The majority of the federal workforce is not actually located in D.C. They're located all across the country. So if you're not local here to the Washington, D.C. area, you can find opportunities across the country. And even within 7th Sense, we have contracts that are not local to this area. So, never let that be a reason why you shouldn't inquire about opportunities here with 7th Sense. Okay, so moving on to our poll. What sparked your interest in the acquisition career field? Okay, so we'll give you everyone a moment to log their response. Okay. Okay, so the majority of you found out from friend, family, or coworker. That's awesome. Well, no, that's the second response. Work experience. That's great too. And I love the randomly came across it. That's actually my story. I randomly came into this acquisition career field and have now spent more than 20 years in it. So, it's possible even if you just came across this. Okay. So thank you all for answering our poll question, and we will move right along. Okay, so rather than hear me talk more about generally what the acquisition career field is, I do want to highlight one thing. We titled this, How Far Can You Go? And far is actually a play on words. For those of you who don't have familiarity with the acquisition career field, it actually stands for Federal Acquisition Regulations. So this career field is actually, I guess, it's standardized or regulated by a certain set of rules called the FAR, or Federal Acquisition Regulations. So we just did a little play on words. It's nothing that you need to know, but for those of you, we thought it was cute as practitioners to add that into our title. So without further ado, I will start with our panel. We're going to have a round robin with our panelists. And our first question, how did you get started in federal acquisition? So I will present that question to Jackie. Jackie is new to the career field. And so Jackie, how did you get started in federal acquisition?
Yeah, so hi everyone. My start in federal acquisition was actually very recently. I just started this past September, so I've been doing it for about 3 months now. Before becoming a contract specialist, I was actually a project manager in the hospitality industry. So as many of you may know or be experiencing as well, that industry took a bit of a hit recently. So I started to reevaluate my career goals and look for new opportunities. So during my job search, I came across the posting for the job I'm currently holding, which is a contract specialist with the Uniformed Services University. And I saw a lot of skills in that job post that I was currently using, and doing daily in my project management role. So it was definitely transferable skills that were also listed in the contract specialist role, which really drew my attention. And so far, it's been a great fit. And I saw this as a great opportunity to kind of pivot professionally and apply myself and my skill set to a new profession that is very secure, which is very important to me right now, especially in this time. And also, as you've heard, very much in demand. So if any of you are finding yourself in a similar situation, I know with the poll, there was quite a few of you that were doing career changes. So if that was expected or unexpected, I do believe federal acquisition was a great option for me and could be for you too. So there's a lot that you can grow into. You'll hear throughout the panelists all of the different experiences you can get. So as long as you have those innate skill sets that have probably made you successful in your previous jobs or elsewhere, like organization, time management, detail orientation, you can learn the rest. So don't be deterred if you don't have a specific education or background in acquisitions or contracting. Those things can be learned, as I've been doing for the past few months. I had no idea going into it what the FAR was or any of the regulations, and I've been able to learn that. So don't let that be a deterrent. But yeah, that's how I got into it.
Okay. All right, thank you, Jackie. So as Jackie said, for many of us in this career field, it's not something that we necessarily knew anything about. It's something that we sort of learned about, and we use skills that we already had or had gotten from maybe prior positions and applied them to this job. My personal experience was that, I came out of college and didn't know, I actually wanted to be a political speechwriter, and somehow ended up being a contract administrator. So, you never know where it leads you. And as Jackie said, skills are transferable. So don't think that you have to have like legal background or some, fancy degree in order to do this. It's a really rewarding career. Okay, so thank you, Jackie. Okay, moving on to our next question. Okay, what's the best piece of advice you received early in your career? So I will pose this question to Glenn. Glenn, can you share some insights with us?
Certainly. I think the best piece of advice you can give someone early in their career is to be helpful. And actually, like being helpful in this career field, in this industry, is quite a skill set and it can really open doors. By being helpful, you can take off some of the burden on the team, and some of our senior folks in this career field have a lot of work they're doing, and they'll be more than willing to teach you some of their processes and teach you some of the full life cycle acquisition, and some of those things in particular, some of the market research elements. How to write statements of work, how to do acquisition plans, so forth and so on. And that in turn will help you become a seasoned acquisition professional very quickly because there's no shortage of work to go around. So I would say that's the best piece of advice, not only in this career field, but in anything that you choose to do. If you're someone that's helpful and you're someone that takes initiative, you'll go far.
Okay. Awesome. Glenn, I could not agree with you more. In fact, I had to rethink my prior answer. I did not start out as a contract administrator. I started as an admin for a contract administrator. So it wasn't even that glamorous at that time. And you're right, being helpful actually was the way or my path into the door into this career field, because there was no shortage of things that people needed help with or, welcomed to give you, more to do. And I can honestly say that in this career field and, all the many positions I've held that, I really, it came to me because, either being helpful or just raising your hand to say, I want to support you in this. So I totally agree with you, Glenn. Thank you for sharing that. This actually brings back great memories, so thanks, Glenn. Okay, moving on to our next question.
End of year.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so what do you like best about acquisition? So I'm going to present this question to Kevin. So Kevin, let's hear from you.
Thanks, Gloria. Hi, everybody. The best thing about acquisition, I've been doing this a long time. I started in the Army. What I've seen in over 30 years of Army career, and now as a civilian contractor, the best thing is the variety of work. Every day is something new and interesting. Different types of work. It's not a cookie cutter. You don't get bored in your job as you go day to day. You'll get something new on your desk every day, every other day, and a new challenge. And I think the second part is seeing something through from start to finish on your projects. You start with projects in the acquisition field that is an idea in somebody's head, and something gets written down and developed, and eventually it gets put in if we're going to contract for that service and procure it. You know, you document what you're going to do and write your requirements, and then it ends up being delivering a product. And in my military career, which I look back on very fondly, but you'd put soldiers in austere environments. There was not a lot of capability there, and they'd rely on contracting professionals to come in, and whatever they didn't carry with them into that location, we'd procure it and had services for everything you could imagine for them, from housing to food service, you name it. We would procure it and put that together. So it was amazing to look back and say, this was just someone's idea and we saw it through, and look at how we develop these things. So variety and seeing things through start to finish, it's a very satisfying job. It's a great career field.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Kevin. Kevin brings up a really good point about the variety and the things that, you experience and you get exposed to, and the different, what I guess we would call a project or a program. None of the things that you see or that are delivered by the government happen really without contracts. So, it's the behind the scenes work, but it's the really rewarding work. I mean, if you really want to feel like you're contributing, and I know everything today is political, but this is a really great career field because you feel a sense of pride and accomplishment when you can see something that actually gets deployed or that you've actually helped soldiers. So those things are really rewarding. So this is a great career field for that. I can't stress that enough. Okay, so let's go to our last question. Okay, so this will go to Lorna. What experience and qualities do you like most and that makes the most well-rounded acquisition professional?
Thank you, Gloria. So as mentioned earlier, like with Jackie, when it comes to experience to be an acquisition professional, you can come from a variety of backgrounds, because one of the amazing things about being in this field is that you can be taught, and it's ever changing. So we all are constantly learning. So when you think about your experience, just be, cognizant that you don't necessarily have to start in acquisitions or procurement or buying or anything like that to be a very successful, personnel in this field. But there are key qualities that you do need to consider before coming into the field, because it does take a certain tenacity to be successful. So I'm going to list some of those for you guys today. Number one, you have to be motivated by problem solving. One of the main functions of your job when you become a contract specialist, a contracting officer, or any of the other, professions that are in this career field is that you have to be motivated to help people solve problems. Like Glenn said earlier, being helpful, being willing and wanting to solve problems is what's going to be the key to you learning and growing and reaching some of those top tier positions, because you want to solve the problems that the government has as a need. And as Kevin said, there's nothing that we're doing that you guys see that doesn't require acquisitions, from hotels to cars to cell phones to medical device and medical research. As you see, we're in COVID-19. A lot of the vaccines and the PPE was procured during, from a contract specialist in a contracting shop. Next, like Jackie said earlier, you have to be organized. So if you're currently in a position where it requires a lot of organizational skills and time management skills, then you will be successful here, because our job is always moving. So you have to have a way of keeping yourself on track. So being organized is key because you'll be helping people and they're going to be asking you for different parts of the process, and you will always have something new on your desk. So you will definitely need to be organized. The next key quality I think is very important is patience. Patience because it is ever changing. Patience because you'll always be learning and you're working with a lot of people and you're going to be busy. So you're going to have to be patient with the process. You know, you're depending on just different parts of the process to move that may not necessarily, you know, move the way you want them to move. But when you're patient and you're able to see things through and you're able to just, you know, take it all in, you'll definitely be successful. Next, and this may sound, indifferent because it doesn't come up often, is a strong sense of emotional intelligence. Now, I say that because in this workforce, you're going to work with a variety of people, and a lot of the missions in the federal workforce, it's just a lot of passion behind it, from the researchers who are looking for, new medication and cures for diseases, or just simply creating robotics. Everything is tied to a mission, and you're working with individuals who are passionate with that mission. What comes with passion? Personalities. What comes with personalities? Different ways that you have to learn how to adapt and work with people. So a strong sense that everybody is still human, and you're going to come into the office and work with a variety of people. Having a strong sense of emotional intelligence and not taking anything too personally in this career field will definitely get you far. Next, able to adapt to change quickly. As Kevin said, and as all the panelists have been saying, you're busy and things happen quite quickly. And if you do choose to come into this career field, you will learn that, the summer, when everybody else is out at the beach and having fun, is one of our busiest seasons in acquisition. So you're going to be called to the carpet to do a lot of work in a short amount of time. You've got to be willing to be able to be adaptable, because you never know what's going to happen. Somebody might have forgot about a requirement that needs to go out, and you may have to award it in less than a week. And you've got to be able to adapt to that. And that brings me to my next quality: working well under pressure. It's pressure. You can get anxious. I've had moments where I've just experienced the anxiety because I'm like, oh, I've got 15 things to do and they're all due within days of each other. But when you buckle down and you're able to work well under pressure, you can get it done. And lastly, which is my favorite part about being in this career field, is a love for teamwork. You're never going to be alone in acquisitions. It takes a team to get from the just mere idea of a mission, a mere idea of an requirement, all the way to the award process. There's different people you're going to be interacting with along the way to get it approved, get it funded, and seeing the fruits of your labor. So if you like working with people and you love being a part of a team environment, then this is definitely going to be a career field that you'll excel in, because I love people. So, those are my top qualities that I think anybody should have in order to succeed in this career path.
Okay. Wow, Lorna, that was really awesome. And I would have to agree with you on all of those. So just as a recap, you said a problem solver, being organized, which is so true. I mean, when you have multiple projects, you have to be organized. Having patience, I think, is really key. Because you're right, you're working with all sorts of people, even people in different countries sometimes. So, you have to bring your patience with you. Emotional intelligence, absolutely. Again, because you have so many personality types, you just can't afford to take anything personally. Adapting to change. You also said working under pressure. Yes, this could be a high pressure job. Because as Lorna, said, you have everyone has a mission, and everyone's mission is important, whether it's with a war fighter and they need products and services, or if it's someone who needs to do training for their personnel. It's all very important to them. And then you said teamwork, of course. The teamwork actually extends not just within the federal government, but to folks like us who work with a private company, as well as, it's a whole theater of people that support federal acquisition. And I just want to add one other thing, being a public servant. So whether you are, working directly with the federal government as an employee, or if you are a contractor, you have to have a passion for having a servant's heart. That's what I always say, because you have to be passionate about people, passionate about serving. So I would add that to your list, Lorna. So thank you for sharing those qualities.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving right along. All right, so now we have our lightning round. So what is the most interesting or exciting procurement you have ever worked on? And for those of you who may not know these terms, I know we may be using sort of industry terms, which you will learn, but when we say procurement, we just mean purchasing. So their experience with purchasing and the types of products or services or experiences they've had purchasing certain items or services. So I will start with you, Kevin.
Thanks, Gloria. So as I mentioned earlier, I was spent a long career in the Army, and in the early 2000s, we were, we had been fighting in Afghanistan for a little bit, and in order to support our soldiers, they were looking at using these small robotic vehicles to go in and help, protect soldiers who were going into narrow areas, confined areas, caves, or small confined areas in cities or towns. And they wanted to use these robotic vehicles that could go in and look and see if there were enemy or actually engage enemy targets, right? To protect soldiers from having to go into those confined spaces on their own. It was a fascinating challenge. And so they were looking from a research and development standpoint to could we put these weapons on these small robotic vehicles? And the little robots were what you see used for ordnance disposal, like if someone finds a knapsack and they're worried that it's like a bomb or something, and a SWAT team would go out and blow it up with a little robotic vehicle with an arm on it. Well, so the Army started looking at, what if we put a weapon on these systems, and that way a soldier didn't have to risk his life, we could risk a little robotic vehicle. And so we contracted for the vehicles themselves, and then contracted for some contractor support, some of our industry partners to come in and help us weaponize these things to test. It wasn't ready for full-scale use, but to test them out and test the technology, was it possible to use? And it was a fascinating project. It was something that we started from nothing, an idea in somebody's head, and we put it together. And then because we were soldiers working on it, they sent us to Afghanistan to test it in an environment. Now we never, not in an operational sense, but to use it in the ground in Afghanistan and see how it works, see how soldiers liked it and everything else. And it was just a terrific project. I'd never done anything like that since, and it was just something great. Why I came into acquisition to do projects like that. So it's really a really great project overall.
Awesome, awesome. Kevin, that's a great story that you shared. Let's see, it has travel, foreign travel, the excitement of blowing up things, which I'm sure that kind of gives you a rush. And supporting our armed forces. So that is very, that's very much in our hearts always. So that's a great project and a great experience that you've had. And for our audience, that's the type of work that charges us and keeps us so excited about this career field. So thank you, Kevin, for sharing that with us. Okay, so next up, Glenn, let's hear from you.
Well, I got two that come to mind when I think about exciting and interesting procurements. The first one would be some of the work for applications for the iPhone that I did, getting the government to actually transition to using your phone as your digital office space, whether that be one doing voice calls for meetings, and also now to be able to do video calls for meetings, which we're seeing now because of the current set of events of utmost importance, and also getting emails and voice recording memos on that said iPhone. And then the other exciting procurement would have to be shoes. And I know when you think of shoes, what would the government have to do with shoes, and what could be exciting about shoes? Well, as we all know, our shoes are mostly not manufactured in the U.S. And there's a provision called the Buy American Act, where things that are bought or procured by government have to be made right here in the U.S. And a certain congressman noticed that a lot of shoes that military were wearing weren't made exactly in the U.S. They were given an allowance to go ahead and buy shoes, but those but those very shoes weren't being made in the U.S. So DoD Purple was looking to get that problem solved by getting some shoes and that we can then issue to the soldier. So it was an interesting procurement in a couple of different ways. Finding a shoe that could be made in the U.S. Hearing from some of the top folks in the athletic apparel industry on shoes, and then learning the different nuances of shoes and how that relates to the everyday warfighter and level of comfort and durability. So I'd say those two were the most interesting procurements that I've worked on.
Okay. Wow, Glenn, that is really awesome. Just for our audience, just to kind of relate to what Glenn shared with us. So the iPhone, I don't know if those of you in the audience may recall, but the government at one time used Blackberries, right? And then they eventually moved to the iPhone, but initially the iPhone was looked at as maybe not as secure a device. So, you know, the work that Glenn has done and others has, you know, really moved the federal government to iPhones technologies, and also the fact that many of us are teleworking now. So these devices give us the ability to do that more efficiently. And I think it has proven out, you know, during this pandemic. So that's really, again, very significant work that builds on itself, because Glenn may have done that, I don't know how many years ago, but you know, look at where we are today. So that's a great example to share, Glenn. And then the items, the shoe items, it may seem really insignificant, but it is really major to a warfighter who's on his feet all day or on her feet all day. That's really important. And we're taking care of our soldiers. And Glenn mentioned something called the Buy American Act. You know, you hear Buy American or buy, you know, use American companies or products and services. That's not just a phrase that people throw around. It's actually regulated. So Glenn, you know, alluded to that was something that was required for this particular procurement, and you know, they delivered on it. So you know, things that you hear in the news, they are real. They may seem very trivial, but they are working in the background. So I just, you know, this will make you a little bit more mindful when you hear these things, when you hear them in the news. So thank you, Glenn. Okay, Ms. Lorna.
Thank you. So I actually have two as well. So one of the wonderful things about being in this career field is you can work in differing agencies that have differing missions. So I've worked with Health and Human Services, which was strictly research and development, and I've worked with the General Services Administration, which is mainly, you know, your real estate and your commercial services for the federal government. So I have two examples. So when I was at GSA, and it just came to my head as Glenn was speaking, I worked for the Office of Administrative Services, so we were responsible for the presidential transition team and responsible for making sure that the transition of administrations went smoothly, from procuring the vehicles, the fleet vehicles for Inauguration Day, to making sure that the hotels and everything else were, you know, set up. And our bottom floor at GSA is actually where a lot of the cabinet workers are there. So we would run into them and we'd have to make sure that everyone transitioned out from, you know, the secured information and the file transfers, and all of that is procured through acquisitions. And we did that in my office, you know, as a team. That's what we were responsible for. So when you watch the news and you see that there are certain things happening and you know that your office is, you know, in the process of getting things done, it's just like, you know, it's exciting. And then when I was at NIH here in Bethesda, I worked in the HIV/AIDS division. And one of the most exciting procurements I had is procuring the research for the humanized mouse model so that they can test HIV medication that you guys are seeing now, you know, commercialized and readily available. It starts, you know, with in-house, usually by government clinical research trials and development. And in that particular, you know, contract, I got to go on site visits. I got to go inside the laboratory. I got to suit up like I was actually going to be one of the researchers and see how the mice were, you know, being fed, the different types of, you know, antibodies and things that they were injecting in them. And again, they were humanized mouse models. So they were a hybrid. It's kind of scary, but they had human cells injected in them so that they could respond like a human would to, you know, HIV and AIDS. And you got to see all of that happen right before your eyes. So that's another really exciting thing about working in acquisitions, because you just never know, depending on where you go, what it's required. And if you are the contract specialist or contracting officer, when it requires a site visit for an award, guess what? It's a great way to travel. I've had colleagues go to Brazil, London, South Africa, Thailand, wherever we're doing project work, you know, you may have an opportunity to travel. So that is one of the most amazing things I've experienced. I love traveling, so it was great, even though it's work related, but it was still great to experience different places and do it all for a great cause.
Okay, awesome, Lorna. That is really, those are great examples. I don't know that I have anything that exciting, but it is sort of rewarding when you hear something on the news and it's secretly, like, you feel like you have this little secret, like, I know how that happened. We started on that 3 or 4 years ago. Now we're seeing it, you know, come to the forefront, and now the public is aware of it and knows about it. And so that can be very exciting. And your work with, you know, HIV and AIDS testing, I mean, you know, think of the millions of people who are, you know, who are receiving that care now that you worked on, you know, some years ago because of that research. So that's really awesome. So thank you for sharing those stories. Okay, Jackie, now we know that you are new to this career field, but as we said, they kind of throw you out into the center of the lake. So let's hear from you on your most interesting or exciting procurement.
Yeah, so nothing is as cool as those three you just mentioned, but I have not been around long enough yet to see it from actually start to finish, as they're usually start procuring, and it takes a few months to go through the whole life cycle. But just to reiterate, I'm contracting currently with the Uniformed Services University. And for those of you who are not familiar, as I was not just a few months ago, it's a university for the federal government that specifically educates and develops medical students so that they can serve as like military doctors, nurses, practitioners, scientists, and that sort of thing. So the university is always conducting a lot of cutting edge military relevant research. And just to give an idea, like if I've been working virtually, but if I were to go like into the office, I'd be on the same base as Walter Reed. So just to give a little background of what I'm about to say. So my current procurement is working on the commencement for 2021 for the graduates of the university. So just like graduating from anywhere, they get a ceremony where they get to walk across the stage and get their diploma. So what I'm doing is working on what that requires. So like all the AV equipment, the security personnel, a stage crew. So that's definitely an interesting right now to see how COVID is playing into that. So I'm kind of looking back at old contracts and seeing how they were structured and realizing that I kind of have to rewrite things to adapt to COVID and add in new statements of work, like needing all of the students' chairs to be 6 feet apart, or needing a backup alternate plan in case we can't have a live audience. We'll have to turn everyone virtual for a virtual audience. So it's definitely interesting to see how COVID is playing into that, and kind of keeping me on my feet. And we'll see, I guess, in a few months how that goes.
Okay, all right, thanks, Jackie. So if we hear about that commencement and see it, we'll now know who's directly related to that and who's been working on that for us out there. So thanks, Jackie. As Jackie said, and I think Lorna said it as well, this is an ever-changing environment. So you have to shift, depending on your circumstance, depending on what the environment presents to you. You may think that is going to go one way. Jackie looked at previous requirements, year over year, what's been done, but now she has to develop something, new ideas around it. And so it requires you to always think ahead, one step ahead of where you are. So, it's a really exciting career, and, you just have to sort of stay on top of it, be adaptable, and I think you'll go very far. Okay, so thank you, panelists, for the lightning round. That was very good stories. I love hearing these things. I think we've all had a variety of experience here, so great job. Okay. Okay, so I think we're going to move on to learning about the federal acquisition career field. So there are lots of resources out there. There are federal resources, there are industry resources, like here at 7th Sense, but we're going to start with federal resources. So if you want to look at sort of the trajectory of the career field, as I mentioned, I myself started as an admin assistant to a contract administrator many years ago. But there is a career path in federal acquisition. And if you want to learn more about that, it's called 1102. So for career fields within the government, they're given a number and a title and what they call a contracting officer or contract specialist in that arena. They also call them 1102s because they're known by the series of that particular career field. And you can find more information on that at the Federal Acquisition Institute. So the Federal Acquisition Institute actually is responsible for the training and sort of the care and feeding of this, what they call a civilian acquisition career acquisition workforce. So, there is some rhyme or reason to it. There are certain requirements that you have to meet as you go along in the career field. Also, you can check out USA Spending. So if you want to know more about what the government is purchasing, where money is being spent, even as a taxpayer, that these things aren't unknown to you, or they're publicly available to you. I know sometimes it may appear that the government is sort of a black hole and there's this information that you can't get. Well, as a taxpayer, you actually can. You can go to usaspending.gov and learn a lot more about how the government spends funds. And then we also have acquisition.gov. So this is going to give you more information on training, the federal acquisition regulations, which I mentioned earlier. These are the set of regulations that govern this career field. So no one can go out there and just give a contract to their friend or family just because their friend or family is in that line of work. And when that does happen, that's when the public hears about it. So, because it's typically a violation. This workforce is really governed by a lot of rules, and there's a lot of integrity around it. I know that oftentimes, in politics, we get a bad rap as federal workers, or that things are being mismanaged, but there are very strict guidelines about how things are and how business is conducted. Okay. Okay, next up, I believe we have resources for the federal acquisition field for the industry side. So 7th Sense Consulting, we are supporters of the federal acquisition process. So we, help we still are in the business of federal contracting, but in a support aspect. And for all of this to work, private industry has to work with the government to get things done. So there are several resources. These are around job opportunities. So there are two sets. First, government jobs. You can go to usajobs.gov. If you've never heard of it, this is where you're going to find all the job listings in the federal government. I mentioned FAI, or the Federal Acquisition Institute. They actually have a program for acquisition professionals. It could be in the contracting realm, what they call program management realm, other technical type support jobs. Those can be found at fai.gov. And then in industry, there are several job resources. You have Indeed.com, which I'm sure if you're a job seeker, you know these very well. LinkedIn, and of course, last but not least, 7thSenseConsulting.com. Okay. All right, so there are some key takeaways that we want you to get from all of this. The first being build your network. So there are sort of industry groups that support you in this career field. The first, joining the National Contract Management Association, National Contract Management Association, or NCMA. That's where you'll find many people in the contracting acquisition field. It's sort of a very well-known organization that supports training, professional development aspects of the career. Of course, going to LinkedIn, if there's a particular agency or department that you're interested in, you can follow them on LinkedIn or Facebook, get a better idea of what their missions are. I mean, you have choices here. So, if you're more into, supporting the civilian side of things, like say at Health and Human Services or, Department of Homeland Security, or if you prefer to, maybe support the Department of Defense, there are lots of civilian jobs, if you're not military, that you can seek out and connect with. Also, investing in yourself. So this sort of goes without saying, but going to those career resources that I mentioned earlier, looking at classes, there are certifications associated with the career field, but it's not something that you have to have prior to getting in. Once you get in, then you figure out what path you're going, because as I said, there are lots of players in acquisition. Some require certification, some don't, but deciding what path you want to go down kind of helps steer you as to whether you will need certifications or not. And the last one here is focus on growth. So I think Glenn mentioned it. Well, we've all mentioned it in some way, is that you grow in this career and you can grow very quickly. If you are someone who is looking for opportunity, if you're someone who is looking for the next challenge, you can grow in this career. And just having an open mind, a can-do attitude can get you very, very far. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to go to our Q&A part of our segment here. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat feature, and just ask away, and our panelists will be happy to share with you. Okay. All right. Oh. Okay, so I'm just getting some questions here. Okay. All right. So there were some questions about certifications. As I mentioned, I won't get too technical for those of you who may be outside of the acquisition career field, but there are certain certifications that may be required. And really, you get into those once you get into the career field. So, you know, if there are specific questions about the certifications, you know, we'll be happy to answer. And then I have another question here about, okay, so how, I'm sorry, what are the like educational requirements? So we're talking about certifications, but what are the educational requirements? And Jackie, since you're new to this and you've kind of just stepped in, you're probably the best person to answer that question.
Yeah, sure. So when I applied, it will probably tell you on the qualifications of the job listing, but me personally, it was going to be either a bachelor's degree or at least 24 credits of business classes for the GS level or the level I'm in. That ranges from like a 5 to a 12. So not like the execs, which is not me. If you are going for those higher levels above a GS 12, then you would need both a bachelor's degree and the 24 business credits.
Okay, great. And I think those requirements are specifically for civilian. I think with Department of Defense, I believe you do have to have a degree and the 24 credit hours going in. So there might be some slight differences, but overall, yeah. And I don't think in civilian you have to have a degree, but it just depends, I think, on particular projects sometimes. So thanks, Jackie, for sharing that. And then our next question is, let's see. Okay, so what does the acquisition career path look like? So I will give this question to Lorna.
So, you know, I've been here for 10 years and I have no plan of coming out of the acquisition workforce. What I will say is that the path varies, but it's limitless because there's so many moving parts and so many different types of personnel that assist in acquisitions. When I started, much like you, Gloria, I was considered a procurement technician, which is really an admin assistant to a contracting officer, contract specialist. So I came in, and even before that, I was a program technician inside of a laboratory. So I was doing complete program stuff, setting up lab stuff. I had no acquisition experience whatsoever. But when I came in, I took to it. I was helpful, like Glenn said earlier, and they brought me on into federal acquisitions as a contract specialist. And from being a contract specialist, you can stay in this side of things and move into a contracting officer role, or you can go into program management. You can become a SME in a certain type of mission area and become a CORE, which is a contracting officer's representative, and have more oversight on the missions that we do. You can go, you know, in so many different directions, from just focusing on the pre-award process and helping everyone, the analyst and everyone, getting everything together. Or if you are even in a law background, we have lawyers that we hire that do the oversight to ensure that our contracts are not only technically sound, but they're legally sound based upon industry and federal standards. So that's why it's so exciting that you don't necessarily have to be in acquisitions to become essential to the acquisition process. I've had doctors, nurses in my life become acquisition professionals within HHS. I've had people come from commercial buying and decided they want to be a federal buyer, which is very similar. So if you are good at sales and you like that whole process of contracts, it's limitless and lucrative at that. I'm not here to talk, you know, money and give out my, you know, W-2 information. But what I will say, you can move up very quickly in a very short period of time. I was amazed at how quickly I was able to promote from the admin tech to actually becoming a contracting officer. And when I came here to the DC area, I was 25. I was a contracting officer by 30. You know, if you are helpful and you really, really want to learn and grow, you will grow, because we need people in this industry to grow. So do not have fear like, oh, I'm going to get stuck. It's really a fluid industry. There's no way to get stuck, in my personal opinion, because there's always a need. in all of the different facets of contracts. So.
Okay, awesome, Lorna. And I think you hit on what people probably really want to know is, show me the money. You know, is it there in this field? And I would have to agree with you. You know, you can move very quickly, and that salary just kind of, you know, keeps going. So, very good. So we are coming up on the hour, and so thank you, panelists, for sharing all of your experience. This has been really fun. We want to thank all of you out there for attending, for listening to the stories and learning more about the acquisition career field. It really is an exciting career. It's a very demanding and in-demand field. It's demanding and in demand, and there are opportunities out there. And if you want to join a company, a great company like 7th Sense Consulting, please consider us. Please consider this acquisition career field. It is very rewarding work. And we do have another hiring event coming up in January, which Mindy will share a little bit more about. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Gloria, and thank you everyone for attending today's session. We hope that you learned something new and that you have some actionable recommendations on how you can enter and move up in the federal acquisition career field. Sometime next week, you will receive an invitation to share your resume with us. And in the coming weeks, you will receive an invitation to the upcoming 7th Sense virtual hiring event, as Gloria just mentioned. That will be an opportunity for you to meet with members of the 7th Sense team and keep the door open for career opportunities with us, either now or in the future. Our talent acquisition team is really excited to continue to engage with you on your career journey. So thank you again for attending. We hope you have a lovely evening and take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.